had a really good discussion just now. We had about an hour. This was the core question, because everyone's talking about competitiveness. There are plenty of reports that talk about the need to be more competitive. But if we're having a conversation about what to do at European Union level, it's urgent that we have a clarity on what we mean. Does everyone mean the same thing? And it was already evident that people take a definite emphasis. So for some speakers, it was much more about the issues about productivity and how far behind we might be as a region relative to other jurisdictions. But then there was some element of a more positive spin on that. If you discount some of the things related to migration, to do with number of working hours, it's not quite so black and white. But the point being, we're not as productive as we need to be. Whereas other speakers, in terms of competitiveness, were thinking much more about the whole ecosystem. So all the different factors that go into making a market competitive. So the whole regulatory framework, the culture, the tax system, fiscal policy, entrepreneurship, innovation. So as expected, you get a very different response according to who you ask about competitiveness. So it's a term that really needs to be unpacked before you get into a conversation of what do you do about it and what the priorities might be. That's the question that we put to the speakers, and with the sort of provocation that they would come back with, here are the three things that Europe urgently needs to address, whether in the short to medium term or longer term. I think the conversation reflected that the reality is it's a very difficult question to answer. I mean, that is also why Mario Draghi was asked to do a report. It's also maybe the reason why it was 400 pages to respond to the question. Competitiveness can be something that be explored in multiple different areas. I think I encourage speakers to pick out, do we mean in terms of energy security, supply chains, defense, research and innovation? And I think the speaker said, well, it's all those things. I think the temptation was to focus more about what competitive means in the context of financial markets. And also, when we think about investment in Europe, one of the points raised in the conversation, but also by Sean Berrigan beforehand, was, do you get the returns from investment? I mean, that's one of the most fundamental points. Is investment in Europe going to produce the returns? And that's enormous factor influencing investors' attitudes towards European investments. Well, some of the observations made, I mean, they're echoing many of the comments in the Letter report and Draghi report about how the financial industry in Europe has changed over the last 10, 20 years, and the developments that take place in other parts of the world. Some of the areas highlighted where we should really think very carefully, they're also the areas highlighted by Eurogroup, that was mentioned in their report, the Financial Services Committee, and obviously the Letter and Draghi reports and others have touched on this. Some of the themes that came up really were around securitization markets, the need for reform there. And I think we were given confidence that given the political environment and economic environment has changed so much in the last few years, when we look again at securitizations, policymakers might look at it quite differently, and you can expect a different set of outcomes, which was very encouraging. Some of the other theories were about pension reforms, the difficulty of doing that at national level, but the importance, but the success countries have had when they've developed fiscal policies to incentivize pensions investment. There are things that can be done at that level, that was underlined. And then, of course, supervision was raised, not so much in detail, but in terms of supervisory common rules, common interpretation, common supervision, common predictable outcomes. So a wide range of topics were talked about. We have to wait for the new commission to launch the next phase of the Savings Investments Union to understand how that will all be sequenced and phased. But it was a really, really broad conversation, quite macro in terms of focus, but quite a lot of consensus that some targeted changes can help the development of the capital markets in Europe.